I'm Lex of Let's Go Every Day. You know that thing. And if you're new here, hi, hello, howdy, welcome. So generally what we do weekly, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Mondays we choose an aesthetic and we talk about it and how it fits into, the society and the patriarchy and all of that fun stuff. And then Wednesdays we do the makeup based on that aesthetic, and then Fridays we do a lookbook based on the said aesthetic. So if you haven't figured it out from the thumbnail, as you can see, or this makeup, today's aesthetic, or this week's aesthetic, is cottagecore. Okay, let me explain. I know this looks like more goblin core or fairy core, and kind of in a way it is, sort of, but here's the thing. Cottagecore it's humans for sure, yes, but also I've done so many just everyday looks and they just kind of all start to look the same. And I feel like cottagecore has a sort of fantasy romance, right? Like romanticizing your life and taking time to look however you want to look. And that includes if you want to look like a cute little red mushroom, then you have the time to do that, because cottagecore is all about taking the time, coming back to your roots, and doing things that you love that aren't going to rob your brain of thinking power. Just, enjoy being creative and doing and looking the way you want to look and doing creative things. I read somewhere that creativity is a feminine attribute, or like a feminine energy. It's like something like that. And to that I say, why do energies and things have to be feminine or masculine? Because I don't know. I think in a way it's good to talk about creativity as something feminine, because everyone has creativity and everyone craves creativity, and framing it as feminine is telling the world and society that feminine or feminine energy is positive and good, because who doesn't love to be creative, right? So in that regard, I like that and I can get behind it, but in the same vein, I just don't like how we have to play to a femme or a masc sort of idea, because more often than not, anything that is femme is generally, especially in the patriarchy, considered something negative or silly, fruitless, pointless, that sort of thing. And the reality, though, is that everyone has value, and the things that women love to do have the same amount of value of things that men like to do. I mean, fishing is okay, I guess. And like sports are, I guess, fine. But like sewing is actually useful. Cooking, making quilts, crocheting, painting, writing. Yeah. I can't explain why that would be silly, but here we are. What were you talking about again? That's right, cottagecore. So cottagecore, I guess the real question is, when you think about cottagecore, what comes to mind? Aesthetically, The first thing I think about is like pie. Is that weird? Pies and aprons and gingham and flowers and fields of flowers. That's what I think of when I think of cottagecore. You know, like cottages. A little smoke coming out the chimney, a little fireplace, black cauldron, cozy, moss-covered roofs, chickens, reading a book under a tree on a blanket. Is that weird? That's what I think of. But yeah, so cottagecore, is it escapism or is it reactionary fantasy? And what I mean by that, is it a way for people to escape the reality that we live in? Or is it more like a reaction to the hell that we live in and creating a fantasy that we can call home and feel safe in? And so the trend of cottagecore aesthetically looks like floral dresses, homesteading, right? Chickens and eggs, collecting the eggs, picnics, reading. It's a romanticized rural utopia. And I think the reason why it has really exploded is because, can I say this word? The pandemic, you know? That thing that we're still trying to deal with. So the pandemic induced nostalgia for simpler times. Simpler times, by the way, that never really existed, because let's be honest, those simpler times had different challenges. But yeah, I think what people really long for is that aesthetic. You see an image and you just want to live in that moment, you know? As always, with all of these aesthetics, there is a patriarchal influence, and the cottagecore lends itself to this sort of tradwife undertone. And if you don't know what tradwife is, it is shorthand for traditional wife, essentially a wife, a woman, a wife who is basically a stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home mom who takes care of everything that has to do with the home, right? So cleaning, cooking, taking care of the children, emotional responsibilities and intelligence, all of that, basically mommying everyone, including hubby, right? So that is the idea of a traditional wife, or traditional, a trad wife, which I will get into later, because that has also become a fashion aesthetic and an aesthetic in general. But we don't have to talk about that one, because that's a whole nother monster. So cottagecore, though, like I said, the patriarchal influence. Again, you have the tradwife undertones. The aesthetic often leads into heteronormative white femininity, and it's got this idea of colonial nostalgia, right? Colonization, if you will. So like the wild flower fantasies, and how they ignore land displacement and labor exploitation, right? So especially here in America, how did these colonists obtain this land? Who did they take it from? And then, of course, who did they get to work said land? Because, right? So that is kind of the patriarchal theme of cottagecore, unfortunately. And so who gets this retreat? Who gets to enjoy this fantasy? And it ends up always being these privileged women who can LARP as shepherdesses, whereas working class women do not have this luxury. Now, I will say, of course, there is the feminist rebuttal. There is the, why is cottagecore not with the patriarchy? How does it work against the patriarchy? And in this way, we have our queer cottagecore aesthetic, the reclaiming of rural spaces from conservatism, and, you know, the idea of taking the land back and acknowledging that homesteading isn't apolitical. Because, I mean, even watching, oh God, it's that show. My sister absolutely loves it, but I can't remember now off the top of my head what it is. It's an old show where it's like, oh, what is it? They're all white people homesteading. I can't remember what it is, but it's like that idea, right? And every time I see, when she's watching it or anything, it's so ironic too, because she is a woman of color. She loves this show, but when I watch it, I think of all the land that was taken, right, from the original, you know, the people who originated here or on that land. And I can't watch it without thinking that. And I guess you could say that for any place that we are when it comes to this country, even right here where I am sitting. This land once belonged to a people that, you know, did not give this up freely and were tricked and murdered for it. But here we are today. And so that idea, again, you know, homesteading is not apolitical. And so in that way, the feminist lens definitely makes it clear that this is not a fantasy, right? It is, there's a reality here. There's a dark reality here. And so in acknowledging that, it also still allows you to live in this fantasy, this idea. Now in America, that's what it has come to, right? I would say in Europe, but see, then if you go far enough back, land has been taken from every original person, you know? I don't know. Like, when does the land, your land? But then Pocahontas will always say, you know, you can't own land, right? You can't own something that was never yours to begin with, right? And in that sense, it's not that she's saying it's the natives. Land is Mother Nature's, you know? Capitalism. What are you gonna do? But yeah, and so I guess the big question here is, can nostalgia live and continue despite this criticism? And can it survive through the criticism? Or does it always have to whitewash history, right? Can you acknowledge these things, these darker aspects, the reality of history? Or do you just have to pretend like it doesn't exist at all? What makes it right? You know? And so I guess my final thoughts with fashion under the late, not so great capitalism is that every trend is indeed a double-edged sword. In some ways, it can be liberating. all of these trends, all of these aesthetics can be liberating. But, you know, like it rejects the idea of rejecting heels or embracing mess, but like cozy mess, right? And reinforcing the oppression in others, though, right? And so there's classism, racism, fat phobia, all of these things that play into the reality, the history of where the aesthetic or originated from. And so as a feminist, what can you do, right? Follow the money, and who profits from this sort of aesthetic? It's rarely us, right? Can an aesthetic be truly feminist under capitalism? And I guess, how do you resist fashion's oppressive demands while still enjoying the style? And I guess all of that just has to come down to who you are as a person and the fantasy that you bring, the joy that you express and help others feel. Just like art, right? Fashion is art. And so if you can move someone in a positive way, can it be viewed positively because of that? It's just, there's so much to consider, right? I think the thing that kind of haunts me with the cottagecore, though, is the undertones of the Tradwife situation. And that is just very, very dark. So to that I say, fashion won't save us, but critiquing it and these aesthetics is part of the fight. So let's just keep pulling at the threads. Yeah. But anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think of cottagecore? Do you like cottagecore? Do you appreciate the aesthetic of it? What do you think of when you think of cottagecore? Is it an aesthetic that you appreciate? Is it an aesthetic that you also understand the darker undertones, the history of where it's, you know, the inspiration of it comes from? But yeah, let me know in the comments below. I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Friday, we're doing the lookbook for cottagecore. Bear with me, I am not a cottagecore girly, so finding things in my closet to emulate cottagecore is going to be a challenge for me. So please give me grace, because it is gonna be a challenge. Anyway, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Until next time. You might have